Joe! Joe on Joe is the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It is me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are getting ready today to talk about G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 97. That's right, it's another issue of Joe and Joe Illustrated, and we're living in the heat of that Snake Eyes trilogy. I hope you listened to it. That last issue, it didn't sit well with me the more I sat on it. It didn't feel like a Snake Eyes resolution. It felt like a Baroness and Storm Shadow resolution, which, you know, I like to see Snake Eyes get his moment. In fact, spoiler alert, there's a moment in this issue that I'm like, Snake Eyes, you're reacting harder to a rando in this issue than you did to the woman who shot Scarlet in the head. So let that be a little teaser for what's to come this episode. I hope everyone's doing well. Like I said, we're doing 97 today. We're also going to be doing some...
You were saying?
And we're going to be hearing from our sponsors, the Movie and Meal Podcast. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal Podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. They help keep this show alive. If you want to help keep the show alive, plus get access to all the episodes of Joe on Joe, including every single episode of Joe and Joe Illustrated. I've been doing this since issue 1. We're nearing 100 issues of Joe and Joe Illustrated, where I've covered every single issue of Real American Hero. We're at 97. We're just 3 away. They are all available if you want to be a Patreon at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. Check it out. We've got levels from $1 to $3, or if you want to be a sponsor, you can go $20 a month. If you run run a fun toy shop or a comic collecting shop, or you want to get the word out about some initiative that you're doing, check it out. See how you can help support the show. Another weird way you could support the show, I guess this isn't weird, but I don't mention this very often, is Joe and Joe runs an eBay store. It's basically the name of the store is JOJ Comics and More. And it's funny, I don't mention it a lot because, frankly, I don't have a lot of G.I. Joe stuff to sell because all the good G.I. Joe stuff I keep for myself. But I just have gotten in a couple reason I mentioned it, I've just gotten in a couple real big collections. And I'm getting stuff up every day. We've got some vintage Star Wars toys that are up there. We just had some really big ones sell. For you Star Wars collectors out there, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say a mint vintage skiff from Return of the Jedi. We also had a mint vintage A-Wing. I've got some, I got an X-Wing, had a TIE Fighter up there, and we've got some more stuff coming too, some more vehicles. And I've got a whole bucket full of really good figures, a lot of the later stuff with their coins, with all their weaponry. They're in really good shape. So look for those to be put up soon, but you can go check out what I got. This is actually pretty cool. I got a complete, like, fully kitted out set of laser tag equipment. Fully functional. I've tested everything in the piece. I spent an afternoon playing basically laser tag in my living room. It's awesome. It's the helmet, the rifle, multiple pistols, multiple chest pieces, vests, 2 star bases, so you and your friend can set up. It's awesome. Now, I don't know if your neighbors want to see you skulking around with lasers in this day and age, but if you guys are old school laser tag fans like me, it's a pretty cool set. So that's up there. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. If you guys want to go check it out, JOJ Comics and More over on eBay and see what I got. So, without any further ado, we're going to start the segment that we always like to do.
You were saying?
Oh, and also I was talking about being on the internet. While you're on the internet, follow me at joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Send me an email there, rather. And you can follow me at joeandjoepod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com and let me know what you think of the show. We don't have any more letters. There is there's no more letter page controversy this week, but there is a little bit of cross-talk. There's some sass in these letter pages that I really like, and I have not yet heard back from pardon me, El Duce, who we resent that email there, or that postal mail to, snail mail rather. So look out for, hopefully we hear something from that soon.
You were saying?
I was saying, Stalker. Now, You Were Saying is our segment for you new listeners, where I look at comic books that were on the rack the same month as G.I. Joe 97, and we also look at movies that were in the theaters the same month as G.I. Joe 97. So we're going to start over at DC Comics, because broad stroking it, DC's not, it's not a real crazy big month. It's February of 1990. That's what, that's the cover date on it. So that's the removal date. And actually these comics were on the stands in October of 89. But with the February 90 stamp on it, there's nothing, nothing really crazy. There's some good stuff. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really good storytelling stuff. I love DC in this era, this post-crisis era. I think DC was doing a lot of good stuff, but there was nothing like that's, like a crazy, like, whoa, Dark Knight 1 kind of a thing. One of the things that does jump out to me is we get a Superman Flash race in Adventures of Superman number 463. Those are always fun. I think this was actually technically the 3rd or maybe 4th race, as much as you would think that they would have done a ton of those. I think they only had done it like 3 times before this. So this was pretty neat, and it's pretty great. Now, I love the way they established that if you were to corner them, they would always say Flash absolutely is fastest, because that's the only thing he does. So if the only thing he does can be beat by Superman, then you're like, oh, then Flash isn't any good. So when it comes to like just raw speed, like Flash has to always win. But these contests were always, set up in a way to, throw wrinkles and curves in it and stuff like, and Superman certainly is up there. But that's one of those rules where it's like over in Marvel, where Hulk literally always has to be the strongest. He may be beaten and you may find ways to beat him, but if there's some kind of weird like test of strength, it always has to be the Hulk, because his thing is, I'm the strongest one there is. So like there's this editorial edict where, sort of kind of edict where he has to always be the strongest. I like that. I like those rules about people. Somehow that got grafted onto Batman being the smartest and most cleverest person in the room. That I don't know about. I like that he's detective. But then if he runs across someone like, they cross him over with Sherlock Holmes, quite frankly, but I'm thinking about Ralph Dibny and stuff, or Detective Chimp. Like one of those guys may have a little bit up on him in the detective skills because that's all they do. Not necessarily Dibny because he stretches, but Detective Chimp might actually be a better detective than Batman. But for Batman, it morphed into just, he can outsmart everybody in the whole wide world. And that gets a little, it's fun to see, but then you're like, oh man, I've seen this in every comic book for the last 20 years. Let's see. Firestorm's up to issue 94. This was a really good run. This was Ostrander and Mandrake. They took it over. I'm going to guess off the top of my head and say something like Firestorm 83 or something like that, where it was Fury of Firestorm And then they came in and I mean, we may have talked about it on the show. I don't remember talking about it, but maybe I want to say it was like, yeah, it was maybe like right around in the 80s or something. Ostrander and Mandrake came in as a creative team, and they were given free reign to like revamp it. And what they did is they kind of matured the book, and they brought in like the Cold War and, you know, these like literally a Russian version of Firestorm. They messed with the Firestorm Matrix a lot. I loved the second iteration of Firestorm. It is really like a different book. If they were doing it today, they would have just rebooted it. I'm glad they didn't, because it keeps continuity. I like when books keep that. But if you've never read Firestorm, or you're looking for older Firestorm stuff to read, this was always like a demarcation line of like anything prior to the Ostrander Mandrake stuff was one thing. And then you could pick up from Ostrander and Mandrake on to the end. We only went like barely over 100 issues. Yeah, IIRC, and it's really good. Like it's just great stuff. It's great stuff. And Ostrander, you know, was doing really great stuff at the time. Suicide Squad and a lot of that realistic, grounded take on these superheroes, which was always welcome to me. Justice League 35. This, if I'm remembering this one, they're frozen. The Kui Kui Island disappeared out from underneath them, and Ice made a ice raft, but then she got knocked unconscious, or she was sick or something like that. So they were slowly melting and dying in the ocean because of Blue Beetle and Booster Gold's screw up. I may be conflating two stories, but I believe that's what's happening in this. But it's a fun, very depressing cover, because it's got this. It's a great cover because it's got this nice, beautiful blue ocean, and it's like. You see the ripples. They're barely interrupted by the iceberg that the heroes are floating on. And then you realize that iceberg's just really melting in the middle of this hot sun, and they're going to die. There's a nice dichotomy there. Legion of Superheroes Volume 4, Number 4. This is 5 years later. It's got Monel on the cover. This is such an iconic image. It's Keith Giffen drawing Monel. And I know people that have put this on their phone case covers. Not me, but a friend. And it's awesome. It is such a good looking picture. Remember, they were reestablishing what the Legion was. And this dealt with Monel's place in it. Remember, he was the new placeholder for Superboy. So it was now Largand. You know, it was no longer Monel. You had to call him Largand, and what that meant to the continuity. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. It's very confusing. And as we've said many times when I mentioned Legion, there's ain't a Legion podcast. Superboy Volume 3, Number 1. This is the TV show Superboy comic book adaptation that starred, is off the top of my head, Gerard Christopher. It actually had two Superboys, the first Superboy in the first season, and then season 2 they recast him. And I can't remember if Gerard Christopher is the first season one. I think that's who we're looking at. And Stacey Haddock. And who was the Jimmy character? Oh, I forget. I loved the Superboy TV show. I have all of them on DVDs. I actually need to sit down and finish watching. I started watching the first season, and it recaptured everything. For me in Chicago, it was on, I get like channel 50. You know, it was on syndication. That's the word I'm searching for. So it wasn't on a set schedules. It was on one of our, I guess UHF channels. Yeah, channel 50 would have been a UHF channel. So shows like Superboy, My Secret Identity. If you guys remember that show, that was a big favorite of mine. They were like shown on the weekends and hard to find, so it was always hard for me to catch them. But man, did I love that show. I adored the Superboy TV show. I feel like it holds up, you know, for what it is. It's not, you know, special effects aren't great, but I always felt like it was really well done. And there was a big tonal shift when they changed Superboys too. And I think they changed locations and locales and stuff. I don't know. I need to revisit that, but man, I love that Superboy TV show. So good. So that's it for DC Comics.
You were saying?
Now, over at Marvel. Marvel's also kind of having a slower month, although there's a few notable things. Captain America, Acts of Vengeance is continuing. So this is that, we've talked about this, where the heroes are fighting different villains and stuff. This issue of Captain America has got a great cover because Cap's not even really on it. He's only in it because he's in the corner box. But it's Magneto with his foot on the Red Skull's head. And that's awesome. And that answers that question of how could Magneto possibly work alongside the Red Skull? And we find out it's not very tenable. That's really cool. So that's neat. Like, there can't be that many issues of Captain America that don't have Cap on the cover and then just star the villain from a whole nother series of books. That's a notable cover for them. Count Duckula is up to issue number 10. Good for them. Good for Count Duckula. Fantastic Four 337. We teased this out last week. This is that Simonson run, and remember he started Beta Ray Bill over at Thor on 337, so they timed it where his first Fantastic Four was 337. He gave him a time sled. It's called the Rosebud 2, and they went on this intergalactic time adventure, which eventually roped in the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, which was used recently in Loki. But there's Sharon Ventura, the Ms. Marvel at the time. I think they were calling her Ms. Marvel, but she was like the She-Thing. Iron Man, Thor joined them, and it's awesome. And the time sled was called the Rosebud 2. That Simonson run on Fantastic Four is just really, really, really dynamite. Highly recommend it. McFarlane's doing a run on the Marvel Tales covers. And this is one with the X-Men guest star. So you're going through your back issues and you're like, Marvel Tales ain't really worth much. Look for those McFarlane covers because they always fetch a little bit. There's another Acts of Vengeance crossover over the New Mutants. New Mutants 86, and it has the Vulture crossing over, and he's fighting. That's not Richter. That is Rusty from the pages of X Factor. Now was hanging out with the New Mutants. He does the fire, the pyrokinetic guy. I always dig this cover because it's, again, that's the fun of this Acts of Vengeance. It's the Vulture, fighting one of the B-list level New Mutants on the cover of the New Mutants, drawn by Liefeld, which at the time, Liefeld was a hot thing. Say what you will about Dead Game. It's 2021. Hasn't changed. But, yeah, I always really enjoyed this cover. Larry Hama's Nth Man is up to issue number 9. The Punisher, once again, has, 6 issues out this month, including his weekly and his UK stuff. Teams up at Spider-Man and Punisher War Journal. Silver Surfer 34. This is an iconic cover, and it is an issue that has jumped up in price in the back issue market. It's Silver Surfer with Thanos. Thanos is in the background. He's clutching. It's not the Infinity Gauntlet because technically it's just his glove, but then the gauntlet really was just his glove. If you guys think about it, because they were drawing him with these gold gloves that he was just putting the Infinity Gems into. So it became the Infinity Gauntlet, but really he was just wearing a gold glove. But this is like the start of it. These are like the seeds of it. So this is a really good issue. The Silver Surfer 34. Pick this up if you see it cheap in your back issues. It's always been climbing the last few years. And this run of Silver Surfer generally isn't considered, like this whole series isn't really considered very valuable. It was a good big seller at the time, but this was, I believe Jim Starlin coming to the Surfer for the first time, bringing Thanos. And so this whole run where it's Surfer and dealing with the Infinity Gauntlet, eventually you get into actual Infinity Gauntlet crossovers. Those really have spiked up in value a little bit. The Nam sells its soul and introduces Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. I've never read this issue, but I do think this was a demarcation. Well, no, I think the big demarcation line was when they did the Punisher and Nam. And then they were because they were trying to save the book. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking them for doing it. It makes sense that they tried it. But the Nam was such a grounded in reality, war book. And I believe this issue, they brought in the heroes, and it was, I think fans were a little turned off by it, if memory serves. And then finally, Wolverine, The Jungle Adventure #1, written by Walter Simonson, Mike Mignola on art. It's Wolverine fighting and Colossus fighting Apocalypse in the Savage Land. If that doesn't get you excited, written by Walter Simonson, drawn by Mike Mignola. that doesn't get you excited, let me also throw in Colossus has a bastard child in it. And I don't know that they've ever, I feel like someone did reference it once years later. Like they were in the Savage Land and they showed this older kid, and basically that was Colossus's kid. I hope that never goes away. I hope eventually one day we just get this young, strapping, metal Savage Land kid and he joins the X-Men one day. That would be fabulous. It's a really cool, fun, overlooked adventure. There's a ton of copies of it out there, so it's really not very hard to get a hold of. Really, really cool, though.
You were saying?
I was saying. So now we're going to go to the movies. We're going to see what was in the theaters in October of 1989. There's a bunch of movies here that I just am not familiar with. An Innocent Man with Reverse Home Mortgage himself, Tom Selleck. Sounds familiar. I've never seen it. Old Gringo with Gregory Peck. Now, I just finished watching The Omen. I saw The Omen as a kid. I absolutely did, but I didn't get it. Like it was one of those like on HBO things, or I think I remember like I knew Richard Donner directed it, and I knew Richard Donner did Superman, and so I knew I was going to love it. Watching The Omen as a child, you don't understand anything that's going on. Man, I just rewatched The Omen as an adult. Wow, what fabulous movie. And Gregory Peck is great. Obviously, he doesn't need my stamp of approval to say those things. But wow, if you haven't revisited The Omen in a long time, check it out. He's just so good. And just everything about that movie is just perfect. So yeah, The Omen. And it's streaming free on one of those channels. Yeah, it's great. Puppet Master on the 12th. This movie's nuts, and this movie's a lot of fun. I have watched this recently. I recommend it if you're like kind of a campy horror fan. Puppet Master is a lot of fun. They've done a million sequels. I can't speak for all of them, but they've done a million sequels. On the 13th of October, a movie called Breaking In with Burt Reynolds. You know me, I'm a Burt Reynolds fan. I don't remember this movie. I don't know. I know I've never seen it. Casey Jamasco, they're professional small-time criminals, how they live and practice their trades. I need to see this movie. I need to just sit down and make sure I see all the good Burt stuff. Crime and Misdemeanors by Woody Allen. The Fabulous Baker Boys. This was a huge movie. This was Jeff Bridges, Michelle Pfeiffer, and his brother, Beau Bridges, Jeff's brother. To this day, I've never seen it, but man, this won all kinds of awards, all kinds of, people just falling in love with it. Fabulous Baker Boys. That's something that would have been huge that month. But also on the 13th, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now I'm a Carpenter stan, right? So I love everything he does, and I prefer his mythos for Halloween over this era of Halloween. But I'm gonna say what you will. This like trilogy where they were trying to make Michael Myers some kind of spawn of Satan, and there was a cult worshiping him, and what's his face from 21 Jump Street shows up. Is he in this one? I don't think he's in this one yet. Like all that stuff, those movies are great. Like they on their own, they're not great to who I think the best version of Michael Myers is, but those movies are just so like navel-gazingly, we're just gonna go for it and be crazy, and all of a sudden he's being resurrected by worshipers that I don't even understand what's going on, and then it never gets resolved because they never made. There's like huge plot points that they were trying to go for, and then they never made another one until they then did H2O, which just wiped these away. Yeah, crazy. Danielle Harris is great in it, and she's gone on to do a bunch of, like she's a scream queen, like she's a horror icon. So I celebrate her work too, big time. Also the same day, so you got Fabulous Baker Boys, Crime and Misdemeanors, Halloween 5, and on the same day, Look Who's Talking. Those are 4 really, really, really big movies that all dropped on October 13th. And of course, Look Who's Talking. That movie was huge. Travolta and Kirstie Alley with the talking kids, Bruce Willis and stuff. Bruce, just one kid. In the sequel, they brought in more. October 20th, Gus Van Sant's Drugstore Cowboy, Matt Dillon, Kelly Lynch. That movie won. I know I saw that in college, but man, that's something I should revisit, because I think, like, what did I watch recently by Van Zant? My Own Private Idaho, which was like, whoa, that movie is so damn good. And I feel like I'll feel the same way about Drugstore when I revisit it. Fat Man and Little Boy, starring my man Paul Newman. I think this was made for HBO, but it's great. It's readily available, on DVD. I don't know about streaming, but it's Paul Newman's really, really good in this. He's Paul Newman. Oh, next of kin, Patrick Swayze, Liam Neeson, Adam Baldwin, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Ben Stiller. Wow. That is a murderer's row of people in next of kin with Patrick Swayze. That one, I vaguely recall what that's about. His brother gets killed and he comes to town to whip ass. On the 27th, the Wes Craven movie Shocker, starring X-Files Mitch Pileggi as a criminal who gets the death penalty and then gets shocked to the death penalty and comes back to life as an electrical villain. And then on the 28th, a movie called Perfect Witness. I have no idea what that's all about. So some big movies all bunched up on the 13th. Big movies. It's like, studios, get it together. Organize.
You were saying?
All right, here we go. G.I. Joe number 97. Boom. Starts heavy. Wait a minute.
Now, mass is ready.
You got to give Destro his moment. Rock and Roll, new version, V2 Rock and Roll on the cover with those those twin mounted, dual hand wielded machine guns. There is, in the annals of hard to imagine a human being could use that weapon, this is up there. This is really, really high in the list of, there is no way a human being would be able to use these guns. Now, as a toy, don't get me wrong. Don't get this twisted, everybody. As a toy, it's dynamite. It is V2 Rock and Roll is awesome. I'm a big fan of it. You give me twin Gatling guns on both arms, yes. But when you see it rendered on this cover by the fantastically talented Andy Kubert, and it's Roadblock, gun with the barrel smoking, and he's in front of a Mountie and some other kind of Canadian cop. He doesn't look like a Mountie, but it says on the cover in French, it says, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, Avec les gardes de la police Montée, and it's asterisk with the guise of the mounted police. So that's fun. So we're in Canada, which you could tell by the guy with the Canadian patch on his shoulder. So that's a lot of fun. I like seeing G.I. Joe go up to Canada, salute our neighbors to the north. But you see this kind of realistic Andy Kubert version of rock and roll, and you're just like, oh man, if those things were he would just miss. There's no, like you give like one of those Gatling guns in the movie Predator. At least he's got two arms on it, right? I'm talking about Bill Duke. When Bill Duke's carrying that big old, like the thing that saws down the whole force. At least he's got two arms bracing. This is each arm is holding this up, and there are no supporting. There's no supports for this. This is just Roadblock holding up these giant guns. I love it. I love it as a toy, and man, it's funny to see in action.
Yo, Joe!
What goes around comes around. This is brought to you by the team of Larry Hama. Welcome Jeff Isherwood to G.I. Joe. I can't remember that we've seen his work on the book. Maybe we have. Strike me if I remember this. Randy Emberlin, Jeff, was it not Jeff Parker? it's funny they don't give the names, but it's the same crew: Parker, Sharon, Chase, and DeFalco that we normally do. And it opens with our boy Chuckles and Clutch and Rock and Roll. They're holed up behind a vehicle, getting shot at with Inspector Cates and Sergeant Fournier from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And we learn that the guys are up there as advisors, so they can't really shoot back. They're getting shot at, by the way. They're not just hiding behind a car. There's a lot of gunfire. In fact, it looks like it's raining. That's how much gunfire, and I think that's great. There's lots of sound effects on here, lots of destruction, a lot of gunfire on this page. They don't waste any time getting into the action. I celebrate it.
Yo, Joe!
And the hallmark here of Larry's dialogue that he's done in G.I. Joe since the beginning of the strip is he has the characters discuss. They never lose their cool. They discuss what's happening in various firefights in the middle of the firefight. Like, they don't lose their cool. In this case, you have Clutch just casually chatting with Chuckles. He says, considering how all this sustained fire is whittling away our mutual cover, I'm not all that convinced that our Canadian friends would hold it against us if we popped a few caps. And then Chuckles replies with, Inspector Cates, would you mind terribly if we helped you out on the firepower end? Like this is the kind of casualness that I'm here for in my G.I. Joe. Like, I mean this. Like, that's one of the great hallmarks of the G.I. Joe team is that they're all such professionals. They never lose their cool. They keep it steady. All of them, like to a man. It's really great. And so because they get their permission, we get to see Roadblock unload in his new with his new outfit and his new machine guns. And you see it drawn in a little more cartoony way in the inside, and in the cartoony way works for me because Isherwood's style is a little more fluid. It's a little more cartoony, it's a little more animated, series-y G.I. Joe, like in the faces and just the general body language. Although I'm going to say he brings the details on the backgrounds. That's absolutely not a knock. He's just got a more, a more animated style than an Andy Kubert. So when I see Roadblock doing it on the inside, I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. On the cover, I'm like, how is that humanly possible?
Yo, Joe!
Which is a fun lesson about like the fine line between, realism, how real is too real for the book that you need, or the look that you need. I'm not saying that Andy Kubert wouldn't be a great match for G.I. Joe at all, but I mean it's one of the things why like you really want to match up good artists with the project. Some artists are very talented. They just sometimes their style breaks what you're trying to do. Harken back 30 some issues to when McFarlane was on this, and there was just something about his art style that didn't mesh with what Larry wanted to get across. So that's how you get the G.I. Joe special where they had to redraw that whole issue. And I think this is another example of it where Isherwood drawing Roadblock makes it kind of okay. And Kubert drawing it looks great, but my brain just keeps going, whoa. So Roadblock is just tearing up the inside with, we see that there's a whole bunch of Techno Vipers and regular Vipers, and they're all it's like a hideout, and they've got a bunch of boxes called with labeled Broca, and there's something in French too. And I have no evidence. I looked in this book. There is no evidence that the Viper on this last panel did not get his brains blown out. That we're not actually witnessing the brains being blown out from this Viper. Because we're certainly seeing the helmet getting blown out. And no one goes out of their way on the next page. Yo, Joe! To show like a Viper with his helmet ripped open and his, like his hair flopping around off the back of the helmet, right? Like that's what I would expect in a comic. This is not a complaint. I'm saying it's awesome. But like, in a cartoon, in a comic where the cartoon shows parachutes, right? And you can't shoot a plane down without having a parachute. Roadblock blew this guy's brains out in this last panel. And that's what gets them to stop, because they're overpowered. And so all of the Viper, now the one Viper says, I don't know, my ears are still ringing. Maybe that's him. Maybe. So there's 4 Vipers. Hold on. I'm doing this on the fly, guys. 4 Vipers. I see 3. 1, 2, 3. I only ever see, there's 4 Vipers drawn. Prior to that, we only ever saw 3 Vipers. And so there's a chance that that's supposed to be the dude that got shot in the head. But you know what? In my headcanon, we just saw a Viper get his brains blown out. Just throwing that out there. So they so they wrap this up with the Canadian police real quick, and Roadblock drops this line that he's been practicing, and he says, "Drop them or get dropped," which is pretty funny. And Clutch is giving him the business, and he's like, "That was the line you were practicing?" He's like, "Cut me some slack." And they see that there's some contraband there, and it's Terrordrome components, which they thought they had seen the last of. And some of them are marked for Africa. Some of them are manifested for the Far East.
Yo, Joe!
And when Rock and Roll and Clutch see them, they see the name Broca on there, and they start getting headaches. So because remember, these guys were the ones that were brainwashed in Brainwave's scanner. And so they're starting getting headaches when they think about the word Broca. And there's a nice pullback moment here that Isherwood does with giving us this warehouse to give us the scope of this operation, where they were smuggling all these Terrordrome parts through this Canadian port. It's a warehouse akin to the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's the example everyone always uses, but it's always appropriate. I like this where he goes up close for the guys in the middle, and then he pulls back because we're gonna shift gears as we go to the next page. Before we go any further, though, I want to point out there's a Instant Quaker Oatmeal presents Popeye ad here that it carries over 2 pages to join the Popeye Crew Club. The artwork on this and the colors on this are dynamite. Whoever did this Popeye ad should be applauded. It's great. He's fighting the Quaker man, and there's aliens, and they want the Quaker oatmeals, and it's like the old Hostess Twinkie ads. But the art and the colors on this Popeye are fantastic. Just throwing that out there.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, in New York City at a Midtown hospital, we got Snake Eyes. Now, Snake Eyes' face is fully bandaged again. And the doctor comes out and he says, your friend Scarlet is still in a deep coma. We see him talking to Snake Eyes. And he's says that, you won't even be allowed to see her for at least another 5 or 6 hours. Why don't you go home and rest? Oh, and by the way, he says, if you're looking to have reconstructive work done on your own face, I can recommend an excellent plastic surgeon, world class. He's Swiss, and his name is, and he says, Hundkinder. And Snake Eyes gets angry here. And Snake Eyes starts grabbing for him, and he's going to punch the guy out. And, Jay and Flint get in the way, and Steady, sorry, Doc, our buddy, is a little upset. But this is what I teased up top of this anger. Snake Eyes, you had Baroness in your clutches, and you saved her in the last issue. Where is this anger towards a guy who's trying to just say, hey, go fix your face? And I get the frustration, but this anger seems to be what was missing from that last chapter of the Snake Eyes trilogy. He's going up to get revenge, and then there's no real good reason for Snake Eyes to not get revenge. Storm Shadow, maybe. Storm Shadow's more enlightened there. But it just, if this rings real hollow after watching Snake Eyes just be like, all right, yeah, here you go. You shot her in the head. You get to live.
Yo, Joe!
So Snake Eyes storms off, and, Flint's like kind of giving him the riot act. And this is a great moment because this takes the energy and the lessons that Snake Eyes has learned about not taking people for granted. And in one small little move, because Flint is kind of reading him the riot act, he says, it's Scarlet would want you to go on with your life and not, mope over regrets and should haves and blah, 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 blah. And Snake Eyes just takes Flint and he turns him 180 degrees and he faces him with Lady J. And Lady J replies with, I think he was telling you to practice what you preach. The friendship between Jay, Flint, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet is one that I love. I love it. It's underrated. It's a really nice couples relationship. And to see Snake Eyes, even in this moment of grief, have the wherewithal to say, to impart the lessons that he's learning about his relationship with Scarlet onto his friend. It's not all about him. He's saying, here, you cannot make the same mistakes I do. I think that's a great moment of growth for Snake Eyes.
Yo, Joe!
So he goes for a walk, and he's walking through Midtown New York, and this is before New York is really cleaned up, really, or at least portrayed as being clean. I think this was still getting cleaned up era, because there was a lot of bad stuff going down. There's there's just a lot of pimps and prostitutes and drugs and some gangbangers who in 1989 are throwing around a Claude Rains reference. These guys must have been monster movie kids. They must have grew up watching, was it Zachary? Is he the guy who did the East Coast stuff? I grew up watching Sven Gulli. I was a Sven Gulli kid, and I love Sven Gulli. I think Zachary was I learned all this from the fabulous Gilbert Gottfried podcast, but the horror host for the East Coast. So this gang of street toughs calls him Claude Rains, a la Invisible Man. So it's nice to know that they're educated about that. That's pretty funny. And they're, it's that typical gangs see a dude walking alone, so they're going to rough him up. And as they attack, Snake Eyes just, with zero effort, deflects all of their attacks.
Yo, Joe!
Until you get to a point where Storm Shadow has to jump in. And there's just more attacks here. Guy attacks him with a chain, attacks him with a bat, and the guy finally pulls a pistol, and you see a wrist-banded arm-banded hand come jutting in to grab the gun, and it says, you're going to do zip.
Yo, Joe!
And sure enough, it's our boy Storm Shadow. And he says, the man with the shades just cut you punks some slack. He's decked more people than you've kissed. It's awkward, but awesome. You should be thankful and get scarce. So these guys go running, and basically it's Storm Shadow and Stalker and Wade Collins from last issue. So they're not letting their friend be alone right now, which is really, really great. And Stalker gives them, he says, we're not just your old LRRP buddies who show up when the bullets are flying. We're your friends for the long haul, and we're here for you when you're hurting. So show us how strong you really are inside and let us in. Someone knows it. Tommy says, you're going misty on us, are you, Stalker? Says, no way. Just got some dust in my eye, that's all. So this is a nice moment. I enjoy this quite a bit, where it's like dudes having real emotions and especially showing kids that, it's not about just being there for someone in the thick of stuff. It's about being there when they're having emotionally difficult times. And that's stuff that kids, adults, everyone always goes through, but it's not always apparent, sometimes it's not just, oh man, you physically were hurt, so I'm going to help you out. Sometimes it's, oh man, you were emotionally wounded, so how can I help you? It's important.
Yo, Joe!
Now, meanwhile, let's check in on our friends over at Cobra Island. We've got a murderer's row of guest stars here. Colonel Sharif shows up. I don't know the last time we saw Sharif, but I believe we saw Sharif the first time back in issue number 1. We got El Jefe. There's a General Liederkranz. I believe he's one of is he from Sierra Gordo or something like that? Prince Nagoto. think we've seen almost all these guys before. I have trouble keeping. In fact, it's so funny. My memory on some of this stuff. When we were talking about Blind Master, I'll get to that because we're going to see him Blind Master in a couple of pages. I was reading this going, man, I completely forgot the last time we saw Blind Master. It's not Blind Master, that's Zartan. I absolutely forgot this. It was like 5 issues ago. So, guys, the point is, I'm getting old, so bear with me. But they're doing it's that thing we've seen in a lot of movies about arms race and arms dealing, is where they set up some stands and they show all their weapons in action. You know, you saw it in Iron Man. You saw it all the way back in what was that Chevy Chase arms dealer movie back in the day. Basically, every movie that deals in this kind of arms race stuff, they bring people out and RoboCop did it. You know, like we're going to show you how great our RoboCop is. So we've got his 2 tanks, Razorbacks, Fang 2 minicopters. So they're all going ham on each other to show these leaders from these countries they should really buy themselves from Cobra, buy their weaponry from Cobra.
Yo, Joe!
With Voltar. That's Zoltan. Zoltan's he's the guy in the carnival, like right on the boardwalk. The Zoltan, the fortune teller. Voltar. So he's kind of running the show for Destro, as we'll see later in the issue. So he's like running this for all these big spenders. And what we're seeing is Cobra's rebranding themselves. They're no longer a terrorist organization. They're a terrorist state. And so with that, they're just going to sell arms to everybody openly and brazenly. And that's through the Destro connection, which he established a few issues back. So we do catch up with Fredmander, Cobra Fredmander. And he's hanging out with a bunch of ladies decked out in their hospitality, reliability, like basically they're in bikinis and they're there to entertain the foreign dignitaries, if you will.
Yo, Joe!
And in a nice storytelling bit, we cut from him on display, Commander on display in this car. We just cut to someone looking through binoculars, and the fact that they're drawn looking back at the other page too tells us that that's what they're looking at. You know, if you flip this top panel, so it's Billy. I can't believe they brought Tyrone, Blind Master / Zartan, his buddy Tyrone, Billy, Raptor, and Captain Min is back, who's great, and they're like on a hill overlooking this display, and Billy's looking through binoculars, and he's watching Cobra Commander, which we see in the next panel through the little binoculars. But if you take this, they're on he's kind of in the middle of it, but he's looking towards the left, and it's on the right hand page, so he's looking at the left hand page where Cobra Commander was. If you drew it the other way and had Billy looking off the page, so he's on the right-hand page and he's looking where there is no comic page, it breaks a little bit of the narrative for the reader. So it's a really subtle, very gentle way to keep you focused and know that that's what Billy's looking at. And they cement it in the second panel, but you get it all in that first one simply because the direction that they drew him, which is cool. So yeah, Tyrone's here. I can't believe they brought Tyrone to Cobra Island. And Billy provides some narrative heavy lifting for us here. So he tells the reader that it's actually not Cobra Commander, but it's actually a Crimson Guardsman of the Fred series, a mechanical genius who designed the battle armor and Billy's mechanical prosthetic leg.
Yo, Joe!
And the dialogue, the grammar on Captain Min in this issue is rough. But, you know, it is what it is. And Captain Min is not happy about being back on Cobra Island. Because remember, he lived there for a while after they thought they had killed him. He lived in the sewers, and eventually he blackmailed, I think it was Cobra Commander himself. It might have been Mindbender, but I think it was Cobra Commander himself to give him a boat, and he gave him a Cobra hydrofoil that he turned into a fishing boat. And so that's what they've used to sneak back to Cobra Island. And we're seeing here that the hydrofoil is actually being camouflaged by some machine that Min says he can't believe that it was made by the Blind Master. It's more like something Zartan would make. And then we see the Blind Master saying, Zartan is no more. Enough of this tomfoolery. It's time to get the show on the road. So, like, that discussion of Zartan is enough to get the actual Zartan, who's disguised himself to redeem himself as the Blind Master, to, like, all right, let's get moving before we talk any more about Zartan, because he doesn't want to blow his cover. I totally forgot that resolution where Zartan kills the Blind Master and becomes him. Absolutely forgot about that. So, yeah, this is Zartan. So he leaves those guys with, he goes on a recon, and they trust that even though he's blind, he can see more than they could. Yo, Joe! At the reception, Cobra Commander is acting the fool with all these young ladies. Just a buffoonery. Now, Mindbender comes up to him and says, I need to have a word with you in private. There is a Russian woman with a Cobra catalog. I'm assuming a catalog of all their armament. Once again, cementing the fact that Cobra has the best infrastructure around, better than G.I. Joe. They have retirement communities. They have insurance benefits. They have whole towns. They have like Cobra Life magazines. Now they also have an armaments catalog. Cobra does it all. So he gets pulled into this side room by Mindbender. But when that happens, Voltar sees Mindbender and he says, "Didn't I just see you leave with Cobra Commander?" And the real Mindbender's like, nonsense. But this is a great little bit, and this is just a bit that you throw in to a book to give it some humor, give it some fun, like throw a joke in there to not make it just a scene about the revelation that the reveal here for us is that that's not Cobra Commander, or that's not Mindbender, right? So for us, that's the reveal of this page. That's the important part of this page. But you have pages to do. You have panels to do, right? You have panels to finish. So in this one, they add the joke about, was it your idea to have Toxo Vipers serve the canapes? The implications escaped you, I'm sure. Now, what was it? So the idea that the Toxo Vipers are serving the food is just hilarious, and it's a great joke, and it's subtle, and it's quick, and it takes nothing away from the gist of the story, but it adds, in one of the panels that we had to fill, it adds a good fun pun and just a good fun inside joke. It's great, especially if you kind of understand what Toxo Vipers are. If you don't get it, then you can kind of glean it from the word Toxo. Yo, Joe! Now, in that room, we see the traditional Zartan shape change effect. And this is a great storytelling trick. It's it's a moving camera. That's how I always like to think of this, as if you were to take a camera and pivot it from the left side of a character all the way to the right side of the character, with the focal point being the back of their head. And in the middle of that, that's when the character changes. So it's like you're looking at the Hulk, and by the time the camera gets to the right shoulder, and it starts on the left shoulder, by the time it gets to the right shoulder, he's become Bruce Banner. Like that kind of change. If you're doing it in a live action movie, and in comics, I've seen this a few times where they do this, and it's great. Where it's same size panel, everything's the same. You have a gutter in the middle, and on the one side, it's the left hand side of the person, and they're, in this case, the back of Mindbender's bald head with his cape. And on the other side, it's like you've shifted to the right shoulder, and now it's obviously someone else. And in this case, it's Zartan. And you get the reaction from the person that they're looking at. So, and the angle on the person also shifts too, because the camera has like rotated around the room. Again, really nice blocking and tackling on the storytelling there. So Zartan puts a gun up his nose, and the last time they met, Cobra Commander tried to have Zartan killed. And Zartan actually says, "You got your wish. I'm no longer among the living." So Fred actually thinks he's insane. He's like, "Anything you say, Zartan." But as he's talking to him, the real Mindbender slips in behind him. And that's going to be an issue. Yo, Joe! But as the real Mindbender is standing there, a raptor shows up. And remember, Mindbender has no idea who Raptor is. So he's like, who are you? And where did you get that silly outfit? And Raptor flies back with you've got some nerve criticizing my wardrobe. I'm Raptor, and I think you and I can talk turkey. Oh, boy. And he's basically saying, you're having trouble controlling that cheap imposter. But he puts into his head that you can clone living replicants here. So why don't you just clone the original Cobra Commander? Because Raptor knows where the original body is. So that's going to put an idea into Mindbender's head.
Yo, Joe!
And on the other side of the island, a little more narrative lifting of explaining how they knew who Min was and stuff, because they, it's not like they were buddies with him, but there's just a brief little, where Billy heard about it through the discussion with the ninjas in San Francisco, but all he really knew was that a captain out of Galveston helped out the Joes. So I like that. I really like that they're doing this, because if you're reading this and if you really, really remember every, who met who and all that stuff, you're like, how did they even know Captain Min? And he shows up out of nowhere, but he doesn't, because this panel explains how. So while they're hiding, they actually get jumped by a whole bunch of Vipers. And Tyrone is holding his own, Tyrone is taking out some Vipers. That is, okay, kid, you go. He doesn't even have his skateboard with him, so they escape into the night.
Yo, Joe!
And unfortunately, they escape to see Dr. Min, Captain Min's boat get blowed up real good. So now they have no way off the island. But remember, Min stayed there for a whole year. So they go back to where he was hiding, which is in the storm drains. And they're worried about rats, but that ain't the problem.
Yo, Joe!
The problem is Crocmaster. And we see that Crocmaster lives in the storm drain, and he's got his Crocs named Chelsea, Melissa, and Tara. Do we know who they are? Who is that in 1989? That wouldn't have been Chelsea Clinton. Chelsea, Melissa, and Tara. I can't off the top of my head place that. If any listeners out there know, well, first of all, if anyone knows, it's going to be our friend Dave Amiot. But if any listeners know who Chelsea, Melissa, and Tara might be referencing, holler at me. Let me know, because based on just the way this stuff works, that I feel like that's a specific reference to something. Because Snake Eyes got his mask from a real life S&M murderer, so why wouldn't Chelsea, Melissa, and Tara be somebody? So it's a great drawing of Crocmaster too. Really, really great.
Yo, Joe!
And they use that nice like 3/4 splash reveal page of it. They don't waste it in a small panel. Like you get a nice reveal. So now we're back at Broca Beach, and we see the fallout from last issue's adventures with the Baroness and Destro, and she's packing up her stuff. She once she learned that her life of terrorism was based on a lie, she's done. So she just doesn't think she can do it anymore. So her whole life has been made meaningless by the events of the last few weeks. So she needs to go someplace and put her life back together. And Destro says, "Let me go with you, Baroness." And she's like, "Listen, you couldn't travel with me. You're wearing that gold mask all the time. How are we going to go? How are we going to hide? You got the gold. Plus, who's going to run Cobra?"
Yo, Joe!
And he's like, "Darklon can run things. Plus, Plonk, we get, is this, I know when he escaped with Destro, when he escaped with Cobra Commander, we might have seen his face for the first time. Can't remember if it was like a full clear shot of it, but this is a full glamour shot of Destro's face. And he takes off his mask and he's giving it all up for his love, the Baroness. And it looks like Sean Connery, which makes sense. He really does. And he gives it all up for her. And so they kiss. And that's how this issue ends. He's going to turn his back on tradition and Mars so that he can be with the woman he loves, the Baroness. And that's it for G.I. Joe number 97. Now, Postbox The Pit. We've got letters here from Greg Jubilee from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Hey, speaking of, we've got a letter from the Pterodactyl out of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. We've got a letter from Daniel Marlin in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a 13-year-old kid. Man, he's excited. Now, a letter from Iam Smith. Diane Hernandez out of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Another Canadian. I wonder if they did that on purpose. They purposely chose some Canadian letters for this. Scott Ruggiero out of Midlothian, Virginia. And Jamie Heft out of Howell, Michigan. There was a little, what was there in here? That someone was pointing out. I don't know. There was somebody in here talking about people complaining in the letters pages, but it's just a standard letters page. Nothing crazy that. Oh, here we go. This is from Jamie Hoft. I wrote because of Shane Cool Nicholson. I have to admit I've seen some dumb comments in my day, but this pretty much takes the case. The guy would have G.I. Joe versus the Smurfs. Of course it's not totally realistic. It's based on a toy. I think you do a good job. My brother was in the Marines, and when he's told me about the military, he tells me it's certainly not the Boy Scouts. So I like Jamie Hoft of Howell, Michigan, taking a shot at Shane Cool Nicholson. And that's it for G.I. Joe 97. Thank you all for listening, coming back every week. Appreciate you. Appreciate talking to you online. Snake Eyes is about to drop on Blu-ray. I know it's been on digital for a couple of weeks, so go out there and pick up that Snake Eyes Blu-ray or 4K or DVD, whatever it is you like. Show them some support, even though we know, it wasn't the greatest thing, but we still want to support what we love and show you love, because now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.